Hello, welcome to the 11th episode of Born in Quarantine. From all the monsters that one way or another found their way to the hallowed halls of the celluloid film, there isn't really one quite like Bram Stoker's Dracula. It seems not only he's been plastered all over the history of cinema itself, but it seems in the East and the land of anime, he's also quite prosperous. Yes, today we're talking about Hellsing Ultimate. I have to be honest, I consider myself part of many fandoms. I am a nerd of many faces. I am an avid Trekkie, I am an avid Whovian, I've devoured the works of Tolkien. But when it comes to anime, I believe I am a late bloomer. I'm a late comer, if that makes any sense. My foray into anime came in the year 2015, I think. Before that, I've watched a lot of cinematic animes, the works of Hayao Miyazaki, Satoshi Kon, but I've never seen an anime series until then. At least knowing that I was watching anime series, I watched a bunch of this show and it was on TV. But I never watched an anime series, even Satoshi Kon's Paranoia Agent, which I heard about a lot, I hadn't watched until that point. On that fateful day, I was in a class, I got there way earlier than I was supposed to, and I was sitting in an empty class waiting for the others to come in, and I had my laptop with me. On my laptop, I had the few first episodes of Attack on Titan. For what reason, I don't seem to remember. I know I had it there. I think I even got it myself. I wasn't given the episodes, but I don't know why I had them. So I clicked on the first episode and, well, that was the beginning of a beautiful journey. Not going to lie, in terms of anime, I am still very much a noob because there are a lot of them I haven't watched yet. And there are a lot of them I don't want to watch. I watched like 200 episodes of One Piece before dropping it and saying, not in this lifetime, sorry. But I did watch all of Naruto, not Shippuden. I will not watch Shippuden. It's a principal thing at this point. And there are a lot of old famous ones that I haven't gotten a chance to watch yet, but one of the animes that I actively searched for when I watched Attack on Titan was Hellsing Ultimate. The reason behind it was very simple. It had a vampire in it. Not going to lie, out of every cinematic monster, literary monster, out of every monster imaginable, vampires are my favorite. I love these blood-sucking villains, and there have been so many good different versions of them, variations on the myth, different versions of the same character. It's just amazing if you're a fan of vampires. There has been missteps too, a lot of them actually. But I'm going to focus on the positive. I'm also a big fan of Bram Stoker's Dracula, so you name a character Alucard, we all know what you mean. I don't think even in the 30s, when they made Son of Dracula, they were thinking we are going to fool people by calling someone Alucard. By the way, here, when I'm recording, it's 4 in the morning, so the atmosphere is very good for talking about vampires, and if that wasn't enough, while I was finishing my notes, I was listening to Tom Waits' Rain Dogs, so everything is spectacular. Before I go into talking about Hellsing and anime in general, I want to talk about vampires. In specific, I want to talk about that moment in cinema history that defined vampires. It wasn't Nosferatu, it wasn't Bela Lugosi, even though both of them gave way to some amazing stuff. It was this guy. And the era was the Hammer horror era.
I am Dracula, and I welcome you to my house.
I'm not going to bore you with a lot of stuff about Hammer here because it's a long subject and I would love to bore you at a better time in much more detail. Here I want to just talk about what did Hammer do for vampires. Now you have to imagine, before Hammer, vampires were Bela Lugosi, they were John Carradine, they were these stuffy old people. Their power came from their position in the society. Also, for vampires, they weren't really into sucking blood because mainstream cinema, for the longest time, one would argue, even now, has always been a family-friendly institution. Even at a horror movie, even at a mature horror movie, you have to realize a lot of families with Christian values don't like to see blood sucking. So we have much tamer vampires. What Hammer did for vampires actually came down to one single phrase, something that, when I say it, if you know vampires, you will probably go, oh yeah, that's a cliche of the genre. That is something that we all know. This is one of the words that we associate with vampires. Hammer Dracula films made us believe that vampires are sexy. I mean, Bram Stoker's Dracula isn't sexy, he's romantic. But he's not sexy. Bela Lugosi, he's honorable, he's a gentleman. But he's not sexy. Christopher Lee, on the other hand, is not very sexy, I accept, but the movie treats him as sexy. People under his curse act more flirtatious. When he preys on women, he does it in the most sexual manner possible. Trans Fisher, the director of the movie, even said to Melissa Stribling when her character was bitten by Count Dracula that imagine you've had the best sex of your life. Act that way. They created sexual vampires. They created vampirism as something that you don't run from, you crave. Being a vampire suddenly became a very sexual manner. And by God did it work. I mean, everything after Christopher Lee's Dracula, in terms of movies, TV shows, even literature, just looked at vampires in a different light. They weren't Nosferatu or Bela Lugosi. Hellsing Ultimate and Hellsing the manga, I'm not talking about the other TV show because it's not a good anime. Good music, but not a good anime. Hellsing Ultimate and the manga are very much influenced by Hammer. Hammer also did a lot of other things to vampires too. He made them bloody because that was actually one of the drawings of the Hammer movies, that they were big, bloody and gory. Blood as much as you could imagine. And he made vampires into a more manageable monster. They were monsters that you needed a few strategies to beat, but you could beat them and they could come back and you could beat them again. I would argue nowadays if you see a vampire fiction, it came out and says, yes, vampires are part of the world. And we all go, yes, you're right. Continue. I don't think that would have happened if we didn't have Hammer movies, because Hammer movies made us realize, yes, vampirism is something that happens quite often and we as a human collective just don't notice it. So Hammer made vampires arguably what they are right now. And Hellsing is very much indebted to Hammer. Not only do they use vampires in the same manner that Hammer did, not only they sexualize them in way more light than Hammer ever did, they also managed to bring back one of Hammer's most primary questions. Vampirism. Is it a gift or is it a curse? By the way, I wasn't kidding when I said everyone under the sun had a variation of vampires. Count Dracula has been on screen so many times by so many different people, and even I played him in a student film. I know fat vampires aren't in, but I'm here to break that stereotype. As I said, my understanding of anime is pretty much novice, and there are actually much better people that can speak about anime as an art, and I really think you should check them out for how anime works. But in my journey, Hellsing takes a very important place. Actually, and I know I'm bringing in a lot of hate because of it, but I don't like reading mangas as much as I like reading comics. I know I have a more westernized mind. The only manga that I finished was actually Hellsing, because I liked the anime and I wanted to see, well, what's the source material, and I can say it safely. It's not that different. If you see the anime Hellsing Ultimate, you don't really need to go back and read the manga too. The anime is actually somewhat better in many areas. Let me talk about the story a little bit. Hellsing tells the story of an organization that is primarily a Protestant vampire killing organization. It's run by Sir Integra Hellsing from a long line of the original Van Helsing, and in their arsenal they have this vampire, Alucard, who seems to be extremely powerful, more powerful than almost any other vampire. There are a lot of characters in anime that, if I'm just talking about all of them, we're gonna be here for a long time, like Father Alexander Anderson, an enhanced human who is from the Iscariot, named after Judas of Iscariot organization, which also hunts vampire but hunts it under the Catholic banner, not the Protestant banner. They're actually situated in Vatican. There is Walter Sidolnes, which is a very cool character. I really like him, and we'll get to him very soon. There is Seras, there is Rip Van Winkle, Schrödinger, so many characters. But the main baddie, the biggest force to rival Alucard, is in fact a character by the name of the Major. Major is an amazing character. He's a German Nazi vampire creating a head of an organization that is just... Hellsing talks to me in two very different levels. One, as a B-movie fan, which I've talked about. It says, come on and watch this series that is a vampire going against a Nazi vampire hunter, and there is this Vatican enhanced human, and it's just over the top to the max. And there is the vampire lover in me that says, come on and watch a cool story about vampires and the question of vampirism. But yeah, the main story is that Major is starting World War III, a plan 50 years into action. He has a very stereotypical German accent in the English dub, which is the dub that I like.
Be a vampire, to taste life eternal and wage war throughout the centuries. What a perfect existence!
The war, though, is basically a crusade against Alucard. He doesn't even want Alucard dead. He just wants to prove one thing. A man is much more powerful than a vampire. As I said, one of the more important aspects of Hellsing is the question of vampirism, which is something a lot of movies and fiction about vampires try to answer. Is it a gift or is it a curse? Are you on the side of Lestat de Leoncourt or are you on the side of Brad Pitt? Hellsing takes that concept and just stretches it to include a lot more. What is a human? How is a human different than a vampire? Isn't vampire just another form of humanity? I mean, vampires are undead. They were human once. In the world of Hellsing, vampirism has a side effect. When you drink a human's blood, you actually merge your soul with that human. Vampirism in the world of Hellsing is the essence of sharing your soul, your mind, and who you are with different people. You actually are living on based on their life force, which is why Alucard is the strongest of them all. He's been drinking a lot. So to be the vampire, you have to give up a part of your humanity. Something that Bram Stoker glosses over, but is a very important step of being a vampire. You are no longer human. You are undead. If you look at it from a Christian standpoint or from a religious standpoint, you are no longer son of God. You are no longer part of the divine because you no longer have a soul. You died. Your body goes on living. You're an unholy creature. If you look at it from a mythical standpoint, you are no longer a servant to the gods. You have now become an anomaly, something that doesn't belong anywhere. One thing is sure, you're no longer human. How are you not human? In Hellsing's mind, you are no longer one person. Everyone you consume becomes part of you. So, Major's quest isn't just, I hate this specific vampire, because he has an army of vampires with different powers. His quest is to prove that to be human, to reject vampirism, is a much more noble act. Throughout the anime, even the anime itself looks at Alucard as some sort of a Jesus-like figure, something who comes in and saves all. He's a hero, even though he's a monster. In the words of Major,
It is that it took a man with the trappings of a monster to slay a monster with the trappings of a man.
which is an interesting idea. There is this scene in the anime where Alexander Anderson stabs himself with one of the relics of Christian religion and becomes somewhat of a religious monster, and he loses. Up until that point, he was an adversary to Alucard because he was a human. He was an enhanced human, but he was a human. When he became a monster to attack Alucard, he lost because he was no longer a human. It needs a human to destroy a monster. And that's where Walter comes in. I might be reading too deep into an anime that is purely just fun. It's a B movie at its core, and it's a Hammer movie, so you're not supposed to take it this seriously, but I've been talking and reading and writing about this anime for the last 5 years. I have a lot of stuff and I've thought about it a lot. Walter, he wants vampirism because he wants to be young, he wants to be agile, he wants to be the kid that he was. I'm not going to touch Hellsing Dawn because that is just too much to go into right now. If you really want to see me add that to the whole thing, I will probably do a separate episode for it, but right now I'm not touching Hellsing Dawn. Walter needs to be a vampire because humanity needs to be a vampire. When you look at it from afar, vampires are superior. I mean, look at Ceres. She's an extraordinary vampire. But you look at it from afar, vampires have it all. Not really. Walter, by giving up his human essence and going to fight Alucard as a newly constructed vampire, just signed his doom. He believes he's stronger than Alexander Anderson. But at the end, it's a battle of monsters. The one that's been drinking blood for the last couple of 100 years is going to win over one that's just been constructed like half an hour ago. Which is why the true winner of the war is Major. He doesn't kill Alucard. Alucard comes back, spoiler alert, but he wins because he proves human triumphs over monster. At least, if nothing, but the sheer will.
Be gone! Mein Herz, meine Seele, mein Leben, they belong to me.
Now this is heavily spoiler area because I'm going to talk about the ending. I want to talk about another facet of Major, which is pretty important, and this is just your warning. Spoiler alert. Major isn't human. He's a human brain inside an android body. His gears. Doesn't that make him a monster also? Yes and no, and it's very complicated because Major is still human because he has the brain on a physical level and the will on a mental level. He has the will of the human. He didn't share his soul. It's all his, which makes him human. probably far more than it makes Alucard a human, even though Alucard is flesh and bones. Another aspect is the fact that Major's army of vampires are 100% built upon the bones and the essence of Mina Harker. Count Dracula and Mina Harker's relationship is truly wondrous, and I mean, you could write lots and lots of essays and stories about just the relationship of these two, and Hellsing wisely so brings her in. The fact that Major's whole army, his beloved war, is set upon the essence of the man that he is fighting. Alucard, Count Dracula, took Mina. Mina didn't become a full vampire and she died, but she had the essence. So Major took a monster's essence and had access to it, but he never became a vampire himself. He decided to be a robot because to him, to give up that part of yourself is becoming a monster.
My enemy is not human. My enemy is less than a human.
I think like I've been talking for like 3 hours and yet I've said nothing. So this last chapter is gonna be just a very straightforward review of the whole series. From my understanding, the series changes studios and it's not that noticeable. I love the visuals, I love the musical choices, I love the characters. I don't like the Japanese original voiceover because I think the English dub does it way better.
We had a good run, Master Integra.
They have more emotion in their voice, if that makes sense. And maybe I'm biased because the guy in the English dub does a very good German accent for Major. The episodes and the story isn't as straightforward as I tried to explain. It has a lot of ups and downs and useless flashbacks. Not all of the characters are good either. I mean, a lot of Major's lieutenants, especially Schrödinger, are very annoying. I mean, their melodramatic nature just becomes a little bit too much to handle. But overall, Hellsing Ultimate is a great anime in my eyes. I love it. It's on top of my list. It's actually my second favorite anime of all time. And I've chosen Major as my face all around the internet because I love the man. Also, I probably kick myself to death if I don't mention the amazing Hellsing Abridged by Tim Forster. I love that show. It's finished now. I think it finished last year, I think. So it's very recently finished. And I just highly recommend it. I'm putting a link to it. And I just recommend you give it a very, very worthy watch. It's amazing and it's pretty funny. Also in the abridged series, they say that Father Alexander Anderson's favorite movie is Boondock Saints.
What chapter is that verse from? Boondock Saints. My favorite movie.
I think it makes a little bit too much sense. Well, I hope I made enough sense. And I've actually managed to persuade you to, if you haven't, at least watch Hellsing. And if you have, at least look at it from another point of view. Again, I might be reading too deep into it. Just watch it as a fun anime with a lot of cool action scenes. But with that, if that worked, if this worked, and if that, my computer worked, I'll see you again next week. Thank you.